Crowdstrike is an incredibly fast-growing software as a service company that is taking over the cybersecurity space. Whether it be stopping breaches or tracking down hacks by other countries, Crowdstrike can handle it. And their stock price has reflected that, tripling the company's value in 2 years to now be worth $42 billion. Hey everyone, and welcome to FinTech. And in this video, I'm going to be going over Crowdstrike's background as a company, analyzing their most recent earnings reports, and finally looking at what their plan is for the future. Lastly, stick around until the end of the video to see whether or not I personally decided to change my investment in Crowdstrike. So hit the like button and subscribe if you want, and let's dive into it. Crowdstrike was founded in 2011 by current CEO George Kurtz, along with two co-founders, Dmitry Alperovich and Greg Marston. They launched their first product, Crowdstrike Falcon, in 2013 with a focus on security threat intelligence. In May of 2014, Crowdstrike helped the US Justice Department charge 5 military hackers with hacking several United States corporations. And in 2015, they uncovered evidence implicating North Korea in the hack of Sony Pictures, as well as demonstrating how the hack was done. They continued to be at the forefront of cybersecurity through the 2010s, and Google actually invested in them while they were still a startup. They continued to gain both funding and notoriety while still a private company, eventually reaching a valuation of $1 billion in 2017. And finally, in June of 2019, Crowdstrike finally IPO'd to the public at a price of $34 a share. But by the following Wednesday, shares were trading at $67 a share, giving them a valuation of over $10 billion. So as long as Crowdstrike has been public, the stock has never been cheap. But they're also an extremely fast-growing company, which has been essentially tripling their revenue every 2 years. The main advantage that Crowdstrike has over their competitors is their products. The core of Crowdstrike's offerings is their Falcon agent, which is the first solution to unify next-generation antivirus, endpoint detection and response, and 24/7 threat hunting services. Crowdstrike, and especially their CEO, George Kurtz, loves to talk about how much better Crowdstrike is than their competitors. In their most recent earnings report, he directly called out Microsoft for being responsible for basically every instance response that they've had recently. And that's despite the fact that Microsoft has their own security offering. But anyone can talk a big game. What makes Crowdstrike special is that the talk is actually true. In 2020, the single largest cyber attack possibly in history hit several different enterprises in the United States, including the Treasury Department, Intel, of course Microsoft, as well as 250,000 other customers. This attack was nicknamed Sunburst. The cause of this attack was similar to that of many hacks. The intruders first got in through the software of an IT management company called SolarWinds, and then from there they were able to spread through the networks to infect other companies as well. These types of attacks are usually devastating because how do you stop someone from ruining your system once they're already inside? Well, it turns out Crowdstrike has actually had a solution to this for several years now, called Zero Trust Security. Now, Crowdstrike isn't the only company doing this. Okta and Cloudflare have also talked about it, but this setup makes it so that even if intruders get into your system, they can't actually do anything once they're in there. In fact, hackers attempted to gain access to several systems that were protected by Crowdstrike, and they failed to do so. So guess which product that IT management company ended up deploying on all of their systems after the attack? Crowdstrike's Falcon Endpoint Protection. Now, I have another video that covers this topic in more detail if you're interested, but this is just one example of how much better Crowdstrike's product is than their competitors. But having great tech isn't always enough. You also need to have the performance to back it up. Luckily for us, Crowdstrike has those too. In their most recent quarter, ending fiscal year 2021, Crowdstrike grew its revenue to $265 million, an increase of 74% year over year. Additionally, $245 million of that was subscription revenue, up 77% year over year. The fact that Crowdstrike has so much recurring revenue is key to their growth, because Crowdstrike, in order to grow, doesn't need to resell products to their existing customers. They only need to expand to new customers or sell even more to their existing customers. Their annual recurring revenue was up 75% year over year, surpassing $1 billion for the first time. Kurtz, the CEO, noted that this makes them the third fastest growing software as a service company to reach the $1 billion milestone, behind only Salesforce and Zoom. That's some pretty good company. Despite their revenue rapidly rising, Crowdstrike has managed to maintain extremely high margins, even growing them over time. Their non-GAAP subscription gross margin was 80% compared to 77% a year ago. Also, unlike in previous quarters, Crowdstrike actually showed positive earnings this quarter, earning $31.6 million. It is important to note, however, that they still had a GAAP net loss of $19 million due to stock-based compensation. Their dollar-based net expansion rate was 125%, meaning that Crowdstrike's customers on average spend 25% more every subsequent year. an indication that they really like the products. Additionally, they have continued to add new customers. Over the last 4 quarters, they added 830 customers, then 969 customers, then 1,186 customers, before finally accelerating to this quarter's customer add of 1,480. This brings their total customer count to 9,896, an increase of 82% year over year. So if you think about it, Crowdstrike is kind of growing from both ends. They're both adding new customers as well as expanding the existing customers that they already have, which is partly how they managed to keep up this insane growth rate every single quarter. They are also starting to throw off some major cash flow, with free cash flow at $97.4 million, up from $50.7 million a year ago. The last major fact to throw out is the fact that Crowdstrike's customers using 4 or more of their modules increased to 63% this quarter, with 47% using 5 or more modules. Again, just showing how much customers love to use the platform once they've been introduced to the ecosystem. Now we'll get to the guidance that the company issued and whether or not the company thinks that they're going to keep growing at this rate going forward, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. First, we need to cover some of the major acquisitions that Crowdstrike made this last quarter that are going to be key to the company's continued success. In September 2020, Crowdstrike acquired Preempt Security, a leader in zero trust security. Like I mentioned earlier, zero trust security is going to be at the core of all next generation security platforms. Basically, you can think about traditional security like a castle with a moat. People are kept out of the castle, but once they get inside, they pretty much have free access to everything. Zero trust security means that every action you take, even if you're already inside the network, has to be authenticated, meaning that simply breaching your network isn't enough to completely ruin your systems. This would prevent breaches like, say, the Sunburst attack from spreading from one part of the network to another. The other major acquisition was Humio, a data analysis and ingestion engine. AI is going to be key to security going forward, and Crowdstrike already uses a significant amount of AI in their security offerings. Currently, all the data that Crowdstrike collects is stored in one place called Threat Graph, where it is analyzed real time to protect their entire customer base. Threat Graph processes over 5 trillion security-related events every single week. So the Humio acquisition will hopefully make this much more efficient, but Crowdstrike also has a bit of a broader ambition beyond just improving their security offerings. They also want to move into areas such as log management and observability. This is very similar to the services that Datadog is already offering, which I've also talked about on my channel, so it's very possible that these two companies will become competitors in the near future. Essentially, if you watch my previous videos on Datadog, Datadog is already in the observability space and they're starting to move over toward security, while Crowdstrike is already in the security space and they're going to start moving toward observability and log management, an area which they estimate could be as large as their existing security offering in the future. So in terms of competition, that will likely be one aspect of Crowdstrike's future competition. But what about right now? Well, one of Crowdstrike's possible competitors is a company called SentinelOne. SentinelOne is based in Israel and they've been growing very quickly and they plan to IPO soon at a valuation of around $10 billion. Well, in their earnings call, Kurtz did not hold back in criticizing SentinelOne. Kurtz said they actually won one of SentinelOne's next generation customers because the platform SentinelOne offered wasn't scalable and it actually degraded the performance of their endpoints. So clearly the CEO at least doesn't think much of their product and clearly thinks that Crowdstrike is a much better solution. I also mentioned earlier how Kurtz criticized another potential competitor, Microsoft. Well, he went even further on the earnings call, saying that customers were experiencing a crisis of trust with Microsoft, and that a lot of them were starting to reconsider using Microsoft as a one-stop shop for both their platform and their security. Crowdstrike is clearly confident that they're better than their competitors, and they're not afraid to say it. But as far as I can tell, they've had every reason to be confident up until now. But now let's look toward Crowdstrike's future, looking at their guidance for both next quarter as well as the next fiscal year. In Q1 of fiscal year 2022, they expect their revenue to be between $287.8 million and $292.1 million, which would be an increase of 62 to 64% year over year, with the majority of that growth being driven by their subscription revenue. Now this growth rate is clearly down from the 74% growth rate that they just saw this quarter, but the CEO explained that that was mostly due to seasonality rather than to any fundamental changes in the business. They estimate their non-GAAP net income between $10.8 and $13.9 million for the quarter. If we instead look at their guidance for the full fiscal year of 2022, they expect their revenue to be between $1,310 and $1,320 million for the full year. They also estimate their non-GAAP net income to be between $63.8 and $71.4 million for the full year. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Crowdstrike has longer-term plans to expand its total addressable market market by moving into areas outside of security, including log management and observability. But for right now, one of the main ways that they're going to grow and achieve this revenue growth next year is through partnerships with other companies. For example, Amazon Web Services. Kurtz sees the protection of cloud workspaces as basically an untapped market for security. And by teaming up directly with AWS, they can automate a big part of their customer roll-on. This is very similar to one of the strategies that Datadog has pursued, where they made a partnership with AWS, included their product on AWS's marketplace, and customers can just go on there and sign up with a standard contract if they want to, and the only reason they would ever actually need to contact somebody from the company would be if they wanted to negotiate some kind of custom contract. So this partnership with AWS gives CrowdStrike A, an entirely new market to sell to, and B, a basically automated sales funnel that they don't have to put any upfront work into. So based on all of this, what changes have I made to my CrowdStrike investment? Well, if you've watched my latest stock portfolio review, you'll know that CrowdStrike is by far my largest position. It makes up over 25% of my entire portfolio. So even though the stock did drop after what I saw as a very positive earnings report, I didn't buy any more of CrowdStrike just because I don't want to be even more overweight in that position. So let me know what you think of CrowdStrike and its future potential. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.